Hi, I'm Monica Salgado, and I'm going to present the paper entitled Sustainability and Smartness During a Pandemic Scenario. I am an architect and full professor at Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with PhD in production engineering. And this year I went to New York City to participate as visiting scholar at Parsons New School of Design, and I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share some results of my research. I went to New York at the end of January to investigate the dynamics of a smart and sustainable city. But in March, all the world, and particularly New York, started fighting the challenges of COVID-19. And so I decided to change the main theme of my research and initiated the search for an answer to the question, what can bring smartness to our cities, analyzing New York City administration reaction facing COVID-19. The search for a definition of what is a smart city has initiated in 1994, when the first intelligent city has been built in Amsterdam. That was also the beginning of the misunderstanding related to the comprehension of what truly is a smart city. The heavy technocentricity attributed to the expression has been lately criticized by researchers, as technology alone cannot bring the results expected from a smart city. The best definition about what is a smart city has been presented in 2015 by United Nations, which considers a smart, sustainable city as an innovative city that uses information and communication technologies and other means to improve quality of life, efficiency of urban operation and services, and competitiveness, while ensuring that it meets the needs of present and future generations with respect to economic, social, cultural, and environmental aspects. In fact, analyzing the 5 trends of a smart city, it is possible to recognize benefit for all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. For example, digital transformation can benefit directly Goal 8 related to decent work, Goal 9 related to industry and innovation. Goal 13, as through digital technologies, it is possible to monitor climate change. And Goal 3, with online access to health information and telehealth. Goal 11 appears at the intersection of the 5 trends, as sustainable cities and communities can benefit from all aspects of a smart city. But my research about smart and sustainable city has been disrupted by the pandemic. According to the World Health Organization, the first report of a new disease occurred on 31st December 2019 on Wuhan, China. The first case of COVID-19 in New York City was registered on March 1st. Mass testing started and the cases increased rapidly. On March 23rd, Governor declared New York on pause and established diverse restrictions. I believe these images can illustrate what happens in New York City during the worst period of the pandemic. On April 23rd, there was more than 150,000 cases just in New York City. Messages related to COVID start being publicized through television, social media, and diverse means of communications. Among all initiatives to disseminate information, New York City administration created a direct line where all New Yorkers could receive updates directly to their smartphones. SMS have reached citizens regardless of internet access, with several updates daily. So I decided to analyze this SMS in order to understand the dynamic of local government action in order to identify its fragilities. During the worst period of the pandemic in the city, from March 12 to April 29, 133 messages have been sent, and I received, tracked, analyzing each of them. This graphic presents exactly these messages and their frequency. As you can see, those messages did not end on themselves, as they have the purpose to inform citizens about phone numbers and internet websites, revealing that this message summarized all information about government actions amid COVID-19. Through the analysis of message content, 8 categories have been identified: medical and COVID information, remote learning and school information, food distribution, control of price gouging, support to small businesses and employees, motivational messages, support for victims of domestic violence, and general information. As illustrated here, on the beginning of the pandemic, messages were mostly related to health support and COVID information. Information about school occurred during the first weeks, as schools were immediately closed and teaching migrated to remote learning. on 4th-week emergent messages about the support for victims of domestic violence. It is worth noticing a huge number of motivational messages during all period, suggesting alternatives to control the stress and improve mental health. SMS categories also indicate the importance of investments on basic sustainable development goals as an important strategy for strengthening resilience of cities. Messages were related particularly to 6 goals. Goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Goal 2, zero hunger. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Goal 4, quality education. Goal 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And also messages related to support to small businesses also are related to Goal 8, as it is also important to prepare the city for the period post-pandemic. I'd like to share some thoughts with you about all this discussion. I believe the solutions are not global. The change will come from cities and not from countries. Each city has its own characteristics, so the level of smartness of cities is flexible and inconstant, and depends on social, cultural, and economic characteristics. Digital technologies reveals enormous potential to support action in exceptional cases, as occurred during the 2020 pandemic. But I must confess that for now I have more questions than answers. But I hope for a more inclusive, human, and collaborative city, where digital technologies will improve quality of life and well-being for all. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hi everyone. We are experiencing a global crisis in the modern world with the COVID-19 pandemic for the first time, that can show an independent and the collective enemy of the whole world. While the pandemic continues, our social practices and demands are transforming with the concepts such as new normal and post-pandemic. In this presentation, we will examine the current pandemic, the changing architectural understanding, and the built environment in the light of a dystopian novel, Brave New World. The current COVID-19 pandemic has changed many temporary and permanent habits and social practices with its process and the urgent request for adaptation. It also brought many new concepts to our everyday language. Architecture was provided with some temporary solutions with the pandemic, and on the other hand, it showed us the changing human habits with these temporary solutions. The pandemic is not a crisis that comes and goes out of nowhere. The fact that it begins, continues for a long time, and will probably lose its effect very slowly shows us that social cultural practices will also follow changing habits. In this context, when making evaluations regarding the pandemic and the post-pandemic process, it should be taken into account that the new and transformed one is realized as a result of the necessity of an urgent adaptation. Since the announcement of pandemic in this period, when everything from economy to social policies, from management styles to production relations were discussed and transformed, the understanding of architecture and urbanization has an important place. With the development of urbanization, easy and fast transportation connections between countries accelerate the spread of COVID in cities, so COVID-19 transmission areas are seen more critical in cities. In this context, the COVID-19 virus, which is triggered of the current crisis, combined with the political regimes and capitalism that aspire to be totalitarian, created an environment of unpredictable dystopia. The formation of a dystopia can occur as a result of a sudden event, as well as the evolution of utopia. In this context, the current state of modern world seems to be fueled by both. It's important to evaluate the current and possible environment in the light of Brave New World, in order to better understand and predict the pandemic as a qualifier of the current situation and the post-pandemic we attribute to aftermath. In the narrative of the book, there is a very strong caste system in the main backbone of the authority in order to sustain the artificial society established with the Fordist mentality. Having emerged due to differentiation of the necessity of labor force, the caste creates an understanding of the order where every newborn is conditioned to caste they are within, and where there is no free will, as the sovereignty of the individual is not desired. This society, devoid of feeling and awareness of the free will, consists only in individuals serving to spine the wheel of the system. We will analyze the relationship of Brave New World and the built environment architecture to 3 main concepts: community, identity, stability, that form the structure of Brave New World, and we will obtain architectural outputs. Managing crisis has been from a single source for ages to make quick decisions in a crisis. Every crisis increases the power and intensity of the single focused power available. We affirm the legitimacy of the increasing power of the government in order to not encounter a secondary power problem in times of a crisis, to overcome the crisis as soon as possible, to learn the right information from its source, and to ensure stability. As seen in the Brave New World, these powers, which have increased during the pandemic process, are in a danger of continuing their effectiveness even after the post-crisis, as this principle, non-restoration of earned right, confirms. As a result, the increasing power makes it possible for the unifocal powers to take a role of social engineering and impose their ideal society models on people in the future. The current pandemic is the name of a transforming system that we call the new normal today. When the new normal continues in the post-pandemic period, the new suffix from the beginning will be just normal, and we will stop putting the normal world in front of every normalizing thing. As can be seen, the life does rearrange with the motive of being protected and sterile. Both socially and physically separated people ensured that there were common lifestyles within these differences. This process, which is mostly combined in the socio-economic denominator, ensures communication in the future, making people identical. Congregation is a result of single or multifocal identities, evidence of commonality of identical ones. The concept of home and outside, public space, which changed the motto "Life fits home", were intertwined, however, it deprived people of identity in their own categories as those who could stay at home and who could not. As a result of these identities, communitarism will polarize the social polarization into who can stay at home and who cannot stay. It will increase the tension between the brain and body labor force. In Brave New World, the difference between brain and body labor force is made clear by classes, and society is built on this system. In the current situation, this differentiation shows that our society will classify in this direction in the post-crisis period. Today, we are experiencing the architectural adaptations and changes brought by the pandemic. The city and the architecture of our future are evolving into a physical environment in which segmented people can be more easily governed, while these different groups make increasingly alienated from each other and cannot use each other's space. Thus, the concept of space evolves into a different commodity, and the concepts of the time perceived by the users with the disappearance and the digitalization of the interaction boundaries creates a concept of time-space. Besides, with the separation of our experience in the context of both architecture and the city into a number of procedural uses and processes, it pushes us towards a predictable and procedural life that doesn't allow anything extraordinary to happen, thereby clandestinely increasing the power of the ruling powers. Although the social memory, which doesn't easily give up its habit, protects us from the current health crisis with the new habit it gains today. It seems very likely that our altered lifestyle and our physical environment, which we have transformed, will take us to a point where we cannot reach each other anymore. When our new order of life, which is shaped by our habits, will cease to be new normal and become future that represents our ordinary state. Thank you for listening to me. Have a good day.
Here to talk to you today about the Pandemic Reveal, American Housing Policy from 1920 to 2020, and its lasting impact on the Black community. The COVID-19 outbreak in America began in the spring of 2020, originated from New York City, and spread rapidly across the country. What became apparent was that it was disproportionately affecting those in the Black community, exposing some issues that were already existing in the Black community. In particular, it was the fact that housing was not available at the same rate that it was to other communities. They had not enjoyed the support of the American government. The epidemic itself did not create this issue, but it exposed this issue on a greater level. So starting in November of 1920, by a landslide vote, Warren G. Harding was selected as the President of the United States of America. Following the summer of 1919, which was a very, a time of great unrest in American politics. As war veterans were coming back, American cities were struggling on what the future of the cities would be. It was a transitional period. In 1922, the Commerce Department issued the State Zoning Enabling Act. What this did was created the framework at which cities could do land use and zoning moving forward, which led to the growth of what we all know now as suburbia. From the 1920s up until the 1960s, roughly 7 million African Americans moved from the southern states in America up to the northern cities, in particular New York, Chicago, Detroit in particular, where they were moving for a better life to get away from the harsh realities of the Jim Crow South, where they, were second citizens. In 1934, the government established the FHA, an organization that was created to incentivize home ownership. It, practiced a policy, as we all know now, as redlining, which outlined certain areas that African Americans lived, and those areas would not receive funding. Here you can see a map which shows an example of specifically how they decided which areas would be African American communities and which ones were not African American communities. They would provide financing to those areas where African Americans did not live. This also affected insurance appraisals. Simultaneously, the FHA provided incentives to builders who created homes in what we now know as suburbia, right? So these new sections of town were being profitable to different parts of society that African Americans were left out of. This was sustained throughout the United States of America. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy issued an executive order saying that this must stop, that race-based discrimination in housing specifically was not to be supported by the federal government. His brother was also a big supporter of this effort. But it wasn't until 1968 where the federal government created rules that were actually enforceable. This act prohibited the discrimination of the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, or sex. This bill passed just days after the death of Martin Luther King. Some of the current issues in housing policies currently still don't address the decades of the African Americans being underserved. These communities were, proportionally affected in a negative way through redlining, which was, basically enforced by the American government. In those same communities, health conditions have deteriorated over the decades. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development was created in 1968 by Lyndon Johnson. FHA became a part of this department. FHA was, focused primarily still on home ownership, where HUD was focused largely on providing affordable housing and providing housing for those who need, which included the elderly, as well as the low income and those with disabilities. So in many cities across America, we now have this signature look of these buildings where they place large populations of low income folks. Many of these buildings, when they were created segregated, where only white folks can live in these buildings and only black folks can live in these other buildings. Many of these over the years have really declined in quality. These, high density buildings have increased health issues throughout the decades. So this presentation wants to provide not only, what happened in the past, but I want to provide some solutions on what we can do moving forward using FHA as the vehicle to do so. We want to offer new solutions that will exceed diversity goals in different cities across America. The first solution is a new FHA loan program, a program that's directed specifically to African Americans to encourage home ownership throughout their community, as well as increasing the African American population in communities that are historically African American. I'm proposing a zero interest loan product. Another solution is to address HUD's issue, which is decades of really underfunded, underperforming buildings to really reevaluate the system. So reinvested in the current buildings, as well as creating some new low density solutions, like the ones you see in the picture here. Also, they should look into reducing the density and demolishing existing unsafe buildings. I think at this point, we should no longer accept what's existing and what's provided. We need to provide new solutions now. HUD should be the vehicle at which that should be implemented, including reevaluating the voucher system. So in closing, segregation was created and upheld through government implementation. So I am saying today that the government must be the one to instill the new solutions moving forward. But public and private parties can work together to implement these solutions. So thank you.
You are welcome to this presentation on house types, settlement patterns, infrastructural and physical distancing measures during the COVID-19 by Adedayo Ayola of the Department of Architecture, Federal University of Technology, Akure, Nigeria, and Amira Osman of the Department of Architecture and Industrial Design, Shawani University of Technology, Pretoria, South Africa. Introduction. The COVID-19 pandemic is spreading globally at an unprecedented rate, thereby prompting diverse mitigating measures to reduce the spread. As of September 2020, it had reached 213 countries with 28,488,844 confirmed cases and 916,296 deaths recorded, according to WHO 2020. In Nigeria alone, 55,829 cases and 1,075 deaths have been recorded during this period. Safety measures. Literature revealed that contracting the virus is majorly through physical contact. Diverse mitigating measures adopted to reduce the spread of the virus are social distancing, isolation and quarantine, lockdown, curfew, restriction on movement, masking, and other hygienic practices. These measures have been found to significantly reduce the spread and flatten the curve. Cities and diseases. According to Klaus 2020, disease shapes cities. The coronavirus is an opportunity to study the relationship between design and public health. The crisis brings to light the impossibility for large proportions of population to follow the requirement for reducing the chances for infection, specifically isolation and frequent hand washing. Shelter at home and consequences. The COVID-19 pandemic induces so many effects on societal and residential lifestyle. Social life and interactions are reduced. Households experience drastic shifts and changes in their use of spaces, income loss and economic hardship, as well as adverse effect on health and well-being. The physical distancing and social distancing is designed to reduce physical contact between people who may either be infectious or are yet to be identified. Physical distancing in informal settlement is very difficult to achieve due to issues relating to neighborhood structure and pattern. Houses are substandard and in poor condition. Houses are not equipped with basic infrastructure, and where available, it is shared. However, homes are also overcrowded, making it uncomfortable and difficult for social distancing. Methodology. 4 residential communities in the core of Akure, Nigeria were purposely selected based on perceived high level of poverty. 211 houses were selected for this study, and heads of household in each of the houses were basic focus of questionnaire administration. Question on safety measures, house types and characteristics, settlement patterns, level and adequacy of infrastructure, and changes people created in their own space is to reduce transmission and the delay of the spread were adequately investigated. Result of findings. House types and characteristics. 4 main house types were found evident in the neighborhood. Rooming apartments, 77%, flat bungalows, 99%, story buildings, 10.9%, and bungalow single family, 2.4%. Majority of the respondents are renters, while 39.8% are homeowners, and A few others live freely in family houses without rent. Majority of the houses have between 5 to 6 rooms or more and occupied by an average of 4 to 5 households and inhabited by an average of 16 to 20 people. Most houses have pit latrines and shared among households with no regular source of water supply. Awareness of COVID-19 and personal behavioral responses. Majority of respondents are generally aware of the outbreak of the coronavirus. 98.1% of the respondents altered their behavior to reduce the risk of contracting the virus. Majority of respondents made changes based on health concerns and fear of contracting the virus. Behavioral changes includes personal hygiene 98.1%, extra house cleaning 76.1%, physical distancing 73%, and changes in functional use of space 23%. However, others made few adjustments to their household composition. Household coping strategies and survival mechanism. People relied on support from family members, 36%, friends, 30.8%, and from religious institutions and social groups, 27.5%. Only 3.8% of the respondents received support from government. 38.1% received support in terms of cash, while 56.9% of the respondents received food items. Other coping strategies adopted by household includes reduction in food consumption items and non-food consumption items, sales of personal property at 11.4%, and others engage in extra income generating activity. House types and safety precaution measures. Several safety measures were practiced by the respondents, such as personal hygiene 98.1%, extra house cleaning 77.3%, restriction of movement 14.7%, change in functional use of space 36.5%. The practice of personal hygiene and extra house cleaning was found highest in all the house types, and physical distancing and isolation was considered lower among the house types because many families shared amenities and living spaces. The Spearman-Rio correlation was used to test for significant relationship between house types and safety precaution measures, and the model revealed that there is a significant relationship between 5 of the safety precaution variables: physical distancing, masking, isolation, restriction on social interactions, and changes in functional use of space. Summary and conclusion. Most of the houses were occupied by an average of 4 to 5 households and inhabited by an average of 16 to 20 people, hereby showing that those spaces are overcrowded. Services were either non-existent or shared, and awareness of COVID-19 was generally high. Several preventive measures were adopted, and majority of the respondents confirmed they altered their behavior to reduce the risk of the virus. House types have significant influence on the practice of safety measures in the study area. Conclusion: government should give more support for households to mitigate the social and economic challenges experienced during the pandemic. Policymakers and government needs a better understanding of the impact of the pandemic on the living environment with a view of informing better responses to curtail the spread of the virus in different settlements, house types, and income groups. Thank you for listening.
Hello, thank you for organizing this great event. I am very much looking forward to meeting you all at the conference. My presentation topic is the crisis of place-based labor at the crossroads of planetary gentrification and the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to start with introducing you Ismail Usta. Usta means craftsman in Turkish, and we use Usta to respect craftsmanship, like Ismail, Uncle Ismail. Like we use Usta, the word Usta, with the actual names of craftsmen. Ismail Usta is the first ballet shoe making master of Turkey. He served for the state opera and ballet for many years, and before he became a governmental worker, he opened this workshop place. He was making shoes, and then he learned making ballet shoes, and after his retirement he continued making dance shoes, all kinds of dance shoes for the citizens in this place. His workshop is located in a district in Ankara called Hacı Bayram, and this place is under urban renewal project in the last decade. It's in the historical center of the city in Ulus, so it's very central. And during our interview, we came to a point that Ismail Usta was facing forcible displacement because his monthly rent was increased and it was not affordable for him. And then during our interview, he said that, quote, "It does not matter to me. My job is placeless. I could make shoes at home and sell it online." However, he narrated his practice as a place-based labor, and it was using not just exchange labor, but it was producing the use value of the place. So it was a place-making practice. It was making a community around him. He was randomly meeting his customers. He was following their careers, dance careers. He was invited to their rituals like ceremonies, wedding ceremonies and burials. And therefore he established a network in this place. And another feature of place-based labor is translocal linkages. Although it's not a case in Ismail Usta's narrative, translocal linkages is very significant in the conceptualization of place-based labor, because labor and the place is never just restricted within the locale. So there are diverse urban histories, diverse actors who are not at the center of the histories of labor and place. However, these three features of place-based labor is very significant for the cities and the districts. However, it's in a crisis at the planetary level, and the conceptualization of planetary gentrification holds a very significant place in urban studies in the recent years, and indeed particularly after 2008 global financial crisis. Planetary gentrification studies emerging mobilities and new urban actors between migrant and tourist, and it touches to some field work, some case works are touching to place-based labor too, and the others are looking at housing crisis, rent gaps, new mobilities, and the new actors, new high-income middle-class actors of these new mobilities, which has been never that much intense. So cities and districts are under the threat of planetary gentrification because place-based labor establishes the value of a place, the history of a place, like Exarchia in Greece, our close neighbor. In Exarchia, the district is known as anarchist movements, but I conducted a field work in this place in 2017 and 18, and it's a very diverse neighborhood, and there are weekly protests against the police. I mean, every Friday and every Saturday there are protests against and fight against the police, and this fight itself has been commodified to represent the district as a lifestyle, as a romantic area for newcomers who are coming from mostly Europe, and place-based labor is displaced, and there are also Turkish migrants who are artisans, who are cooking food and selling this food on the street, who are street vendors. So they are like facing increasing rents and that kind of issues because of artists, yacht groups coming and temporarily living in Exarchia. So I will suggest to question two problematics, I will finish with two problematics for the era of post-pandemic, because pandemic stopped all human and restricted significantly the human flow. Therefore, we are in a very critical moment, I think, in the history to reframe planetary gentrification and place-based labor. And these problematics are how diverse sectors of place-based labor could be radically included in urban polities in post-pandemic era, and how could a transnational act be organized against the negative effects of planetary gentrification among labor for diverse communities. And these are the people I am referring during my presentation. I think their work is holding a very significant place in terms of planetary gentrification. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Ghazal Khaksari. I am a master's student of science in urbanscape design from UITM University in Malaysia. And today I want to talk about how evolution of workplaces during pandemic affected urban planning and zoning. The icon of contemporary world is globalization. However, during pandemic, the main solution that governments had to control this crisis was to close the borders and focus on nationalism. Some countries were successful to expand the economy globally by using virtual online platforms. Obviously, our work habits changed, and this change was in a small scale, but its repercussions affected our cities in the larger scale, as we could see in the deserted areas. If the pandemic persists to continue this change would definitely be permanent, and our urban areas would adjust organically, and our planning and zoning would be more practical for the next crisis. If we consider our home as a safe haven, the safety will be threatened if it couldn't provide our basic needs. So we have to work and we have to earn money in order to provide our basic needs. So if we combine these ideas together, we can create a self-sufficient home unit. And this means that this home unit can last and survive for almost forever, especially during crises such as this pandemic. If we expand this idea to the medium scale, which is the neighborhood scale, we can also create a self-sufficient neighborhood. And by using a proper digital network and infrastructure, we can attach all the home units and also neighborhoods together. And we can just quarantine the neighborhoods that we want during a pandemic or epidemic disease. And our administrative zones were reduced because we divided the workplaces into home units and neighborhoods. So this diagram shows what I said right now. Historically, our urban areas evolved in a very innovative way toward disease outbreaks. For example, in cholera in 1800 necessitated the buildings to have new plumbings, and it devised new laws for urban zones. So coronavirus was no exception, and as we can see right now, a lot of companies tend to be more virtual and using the digital economy instead of being more physical. So we are experiencing contactless and digital economy. And currently in factories, we can use, people are, the company owners and factory owners are using technology for manufacture. And humans are being replaced to minimize contact during the production of goods. And something that we might see in the future, and it is already changing, is the functional zoning of our cities. As the demand for working remotely increases, the administrative zones in the cities will be deserted, and the land and the blocks, the office blocks, are being allocated to other needs. We might also experience population movement in the future toward more natural and rural areas, as the main reason people live closer to city centers is that because they want to be close to their workplaces. And if they don't have this limitation, they might experience somewhere more peaceful. Something else that we might face in the future is the changes in the pattern of density of the built environment. The density will decrease in city centers, and we might have wider spaces between the buildings, and these places actually might be used for lively spaces that people enjoy. And of course, we have to apply the distancing design techniques because for the future contagious diseases. And these are the attributes that the impacts on the attributes of urban context. Another attribute was the undeniable positive impact that it had on the environment. And we could see that the carbon emission in the atmosphere reduced by a great amount, and it had also positive effects on waste and wildlife and habitats and also energy. We could also see that our cities turned to something more flexible, and spaces in commercial areas and administrative areas were more acceptance toward being converted to something more useful, like for using healthcare and these things. In order to sum up, I just want to mention that I know some jobs cannot be done at home, and something that I'm proposing right now is that I just want to say if we reduce that by half, we can ensure less energy, less labor, less time for commuting. And we need people's acceptance, the public acceptance, acceptance of company owners, employers, employees, and all the people have to understand that this is going to be an effective change. And as a result, our lifestyle, especially work-life habits, define urbanism. And urbanism is not only the tangible areas in our cities, but the human collective existence that urges to stand out, develop, grow its potentialities. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I wish to start my presentation called Seeking Potential in the New Cultural and Material Reality of the COVID-19 Pandemic, and I wish to look at the current conditions from the lenses of a utopian project called New Babylon, devised by Constant. And when we talk about utopias, as we all know, they are these imaginary places with unknown locations, offering us different versions of our own reality. And although they are imaginary, they are quite important in our actions and stories in this very world, as put by Lewis Mumford. But we kind of need these imaginary places to talk about our future, also to criticize and revisit our present. So this is their mental contribution to our knowledge and thinking. And they come in various forms, such as models, collages, drawings, and maps, actually. But nowadays we kind of experience a similar utopian reality, but now in the form of everyday instances such as this. As we all know, the streets are quite empty, cities are empty, and even so some other creatures start to appear in our streets in our absence because of the way we live in our houses all the time. And what happens in those houses is an overcrowding and overloading of our private spaces, with working remotely, attending online classes, and almost like doing everything virtually and from our homes. And what also happens because of the way we work and attend these activities, there becomes a kind of a disruption in our daily customs, routines, and also the perception of time because of the freedom in how we use it, to say. So what happens is a kind of a shuffle, meaning a shifting of our ordinary customs and concepts and routines that we have normally, such as, you know, hours, the differentiation between day and night, or working time and free time, our physical locations, the private and public, the way we associate space with activities, and also how we come together and how we make things, how we produce things. You can see that in social, on a social level, the way we come together also changes. We create some hybrid forms where we can attend birthday parties, you know, in faraway locations and in different timelines. Also, there's a kind of rapid increase in our virtual presence because we are always at home. So that, like, in the middle of the night, we can actually run into some live streams of our friends or people we don't know. So we kind of occupy these places more than before, more than often. So it's kind of like a new version of what Facebook's supposed to be. You know, it's kind of helps you to connect with, share with, not just with people in your life, but just with people all around the world. So it's kind of a version of Lost in Translation, but it's like reversed and enhanced in a way. So we kind of have these unexpected connections, and also we kind of disengage from our own locations. But now we can switch to what actually seems similar in the world of New Babylon. These are these sectors covering all over the globe, and what he says that because they are so big, there's this like we kind of detach from the earth, the reality of day and night. And these are one of the images of these huge sectors. So what we do here is basically a kind of enhanced social space where we use all our time interacting with others and just going around the world and traveling, and that we kind of lose our locations and we lose local timelines. So, and also he talks about something like the internet as early as 65, that people will be actually participating in these systems and using them as a way to kind of enhance this playful behavior, since we are like always nomadic and changing locations. But now we can also see that something similar happening in our level, that we kind of create these temporary but virtual decors and images as to interact with each other. So it's kind of similar, something happening on a virtual level. And he kind of found the foundation of this free time in the invention of automation, that we will not have, we won't have to work, so we have all this free time. But again, maybe we don't have that same free time, but we don't have an all leisure life, but we can work and act in rather flexible and personalized intervals, meaning that timelines are being shifted, locations are being evaporated. So now what occurs is a new asynchronous population and a new sort of nomadity, where we kind of experience this nomadic lifestyle and timeless lifestyle from our homes through our virtual platforms in unexpected locations and occasions. And he talks about a global activity of the whole population, and what is also kind of happening in the same level, that like I said, we are encountering each other and gathering together in various and unexpected forms, also in hours, like in the middle of the night, with someone far away from where we are. And we use these platforms quite actively, these like location-free mediums, and we participate as a larger population. So we can say that in some level we are experiencing, however unintentionally, the world of New Babylon, and it gives us a chance to rethink our current conditions and resources, such as time, online tools, or working habits, for a more flexible and possibly social life. And thank you.